Our gospel today tells us about Jesus the exorcist. One of the unfortunate effects of gospel stories about exorcism is they make us develop a wrong idea about the workings of the evil spirits and what it takes to get rid of them. Perhaps the better word is not exactly wrong, but naive. And that is how I would also describe most Hollywood movies about devil possessions and exorcisms. I do not blame them for the naivety. After all, their goal is not really to give us a theological education about evil and its workings in this world. The objective is basically the same as for any other similar production: to entertain and to make money. Specifically, to entertain and make money by scaring people with sensational and fantastic portrayals of supernatural forces and malevolent spirits taking control of human beings. One of the earliest examples of these movies is now considered a classic. Sigurado ako, napanood nyo na rin. The Exorcist, with the young Linda Blair as the lead actress playing the role of the possessed girl. You have hair-raising scenes of her aggressively challenging the priest who is reciting a prayer of deliverance. The woman or the girl suddenly speaking with a male voice, even quoting Latin texts, floating in mid-air, body parts getting contorted, vomiting green substance, letting out a monstrous and taunting laughter. All of that has become our typical caricature about the manner in which Satan supposedly takes possession of people, cinematically gripping and horrifying. The kind that will make you start imagining your bed shaking or the floor creaking or voices whispering in your ears and giving you sleepless nights. Well, I am sorry to disappoint you, but from my 38 years of experience as a priest, I can confidently tell you that the devil is too intelligent to work in such naively predictable ways as portrayed in the movies, as if all that it takes to get rid of it is a well-recited prayer of deliverance accompanied by buckets of holy water and a silver crucifix. Baka tawanan lang kayo ng demonyo. People who are familiar with the Bible would know that there are more instances of devil possession in the Gospels that are not, or in the Bible, that are not as cinematic as the ones we hear about in the Gospel of Mark. In the first book of Samuel, chapter 16, for example, the author describes the king, King Saul, and his reactions of envy and insecurity towards David as a possession by an evil spirit. In the Gospels, remember, we hear about Peter, who seemed perfectly normal naman when he blocked the way of Jesus while they were going to Jerusalem. But the evangelist would tell us how Jesus reacted and said to him, "Get behind me, Satan." He was addressing not Peter himself, But Satan at work in Peter, the evil spirit that was now making Peter switch from being the rock foundation of the church to a stumbling block that is meant to prevent Jesus from fulfilling his mission. In the Passion narratives, we are also told that Satan entered Judas on that Thursday evening when he stepped out of the upper room to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. There was nothing peculiar or weird or supernatural about the way Judas was behaving. Hindi naman siya nangingisay. In fact, the other apostles did not even seem to have an inkling about what was going on. That Judas was busy committing an act of betrayal. And there is also that story in chapter 13 of the Gospel of Luke about a woman who had been crippled for 18 years. She's simply portrayed as one who had been bent over and unable to stand erect. Yun lang. The gospel writer does not describe the woman as bumubula ang bibig, foaming in the mouth, or speaking in a foreign language, or behaving aggressively. And yet, Jesus says, this woman had been bound by Satan for 18 years. Well, people often wonder why they no longer hear of Jesuits playing the role of exorcists like they used to in earlier times. Well, I am inclined to believe that they are actually still busy at it, except that they're probably doing it in a manner that is not in accordance with our Hollywoodish expectation of what an exorcist is supposed to do. Now, much of it is done through the sacrament of reconciliation, or through counseling, or through spiritual direction sessions. And during sessions like these, the minister has to be spiritually intelligent. He has to be able to apply the same rules of discernment in order to make it possible for him to track down the movements of the spirits within the individual in order to teach him or her to rely on the grace and power of the Holy Spirit at work within the person. You know, I think our experience of the pandemic is probably the best analogy for understanding the ways of the evil one. The evil spirits around us, they tend to behave in more or less similar ways as the various strains and variants of the COVID-19 virus. They can work in either obvious or not so obvious ways on the hosts. Some carriers are easy to detect in those who are symptomatic. Mas madaling i-detect yung infection through the symptomatic kasi may symptoms. Others, however, might show no symptoms at all, but they are just as infectious. Abay, mas nakakatakot yun. At least the one who is looking sick, you can still sort of, be forewarned. But the problem is when there are no symptoms, but the malevolent virus is there. And there is also a lot that we can learn from the pandemic health protocols in our conscious effort to protect ourselves and each other, and protect ourselves and each other from the spiritual infection. I think infection is a good analogy for the incursions of the evil one. Even the objective of developing immunity to this disease through vaccination can serve as a very good parallel to the importance of caring for the spiritual life so as to strengthen its immunity against the evil one, if only to prevent the soul from being enslaved or possessed. The same basic principle of immunization can also be applied to our spiritual struggle against the evil one. Siyempre, kung hindi nga naman makilala ng katawan yung virus, it will not be able to fight. I think it goes the same way with the soul. It will not be able to fight the spiritual incursions of the evil one unless we become familiar with its ways and its subtle attacks. Well, according to medical science, immunity is not possible unless the body is able to develop the proper antibodies that could fight the alien invaders we call the virus. In our case, COVID-19 virus. Well, Christian life is founded on the basic premise that we can develop immunity against evil if we receive the most potent vaccine against the evil one. The vaccine offered as a gift by Christ. And that most potent vaccine is the Holy Spirit. This precious gift of our baptism not only allows us to familiarize ourselves individually with the ways of the evil one through prayer and through discernment. This same Spirit unites us in mind and in heart and builds us into strong corporal entities called communities that can counteract the incursions of the evil one, not just in us individually, but also in our families, in our communities, in our society, even in our government, and in the rest of the world.